Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel Brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my super awesome big brother. And
my
to you, I say
favorite
cheers.
role. Cheers.
With our
Yes,
traditional
indeed.
sake toast. What are we drinking tonight?
Tonight we are drinking a pear sake that I infused with mango.
He's a sake chemist now. Cheers, and cheers to you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, indeed. Welcome. All right.
Like candy.
Yeah, it's really nice. I like that. I'm going to do that more often.
Yes. Thank you for joining us on Sex Talk, our weekly forum for talking about all things sexual.
That's right. That's right. And as, again, you like to say, every day should be a day for sex talk. This should be a regular part of our lives. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us at this time for sex talk. So thank you. Hope everybody's out there staying well. Hope everybody's keeping their sanity. Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. And in the midst of all of the craziness that's going on around us, hope you're still managing to have some good sex and stay safe and be happy. That's really the task.
Yes.
How do we feel good when everything around us seems to be on fire?
Indeed. And especially, couples who tend to be, people who are living together in close quarters and sharing their lives. I think the natural human instinct under high stress is to take it out on each other, right? So good couples are couples who can be teammates, partners, against the stress of life and kids and money and in-laws and politics and religion and everything else that causes that strife and conflict among couples. Right. So that's our topic for tonight. And we're really, really happy to, we're going to try we got to keep it short and spend most of our time with our very special guest tonight, the wonderful Sara Nasserzadeh. I paused for a minute to remember where she is. She's in Beverly Hills, but she's been everywhere. I know she's studied and practiced in London, and she was in New York. We had the wonderful pleasure of having her teach for our class in the original New York Institute with our dear departed friend Susan, and my first supervisor and mentor, the late Susan Lee. Cheers to Susan. Smiling down. Sara is charming in the true sense of the word.
And brilliant. Really.
And absolutely brilliant. And she's got something new that we're going to talk about that's going to take our time it's going to take some time to cover, but I really want to talk about. She's on to something brilliant here. A relationship panoramic, as they're calling it for couples. And a couple things she's doing. This relationship panoramic is a tool, basically the most scientifically validated and impressive thing I've read in ever, as far as these kinds of
in terms of sex therapy
go, right?
and assessing couples.
And we're also going to talk about a program that she's going to be launching this year that, as in her terms, democratizes therapy, which is something that every sex therapist certainly, and probably most therapists, have felt bad about at some point or other. The reality that in most places, therapy is still kind of a privilege. And
it's out of reach for most people.
To a lot of people.
Yeah.
Whether it's people who don't have insurance, or even if they can't afford their co-pays, or uninsured people. And in the years when I had a kind of a small boutique sex therapy practice, and joyfully avoided the whole managed care insurance world for the first 25 years of my career. I'd feel bad when people would call up for therapy and say, sorry, I don't take insurance, especially when there was really not too many other people I could refer to. So I ended up taking cases for $50 or pro bono or whatever, and I can't make a living that way. Now that I'm in a wonderful group practice with the brilliant and lovely Luna Medina Wolf and her brilliant husband Asaf at Helping Moon Counseling. I got pulled in, and I got to find a way out. But at least I don't have to say sorry to people who want to, pay all this ridiculous amount of money for their monthly insurance, and they want to use their insurance to pay for therapy. But what about people that don't have insurance?
Yeah.
So this is something else I'm looking forward to talking about, how couples therapy can be available online for people who don't have access to therapy.
Right.
But this relationship panoramic, I can't wait to try it out. She said that it's available free for clinicians. And it's, like I said, this rigorously scientifically validated assessment tool. Couples can do this in a half an hour, and it's like 350 some odd questions. But not only the obvious like sexual health and satisfaction scales, but it gets everything from healthy living, relationship vision, emotions, positive, negative emotions and thoughts, connecting scales, values, financial attitudes. It's just like, the Gottmans is kind of the gold standard for general therapists in terms of like this kind of relationship math. And it has its merits. But this is, I've never seen anything.
Right.
This makes the Gottmans look like romper room school stuff.
And what I like about this too, what little I've seen with it, is that it really is very comprehensive. So many of these subscales, and it's not just about sex. It's not just focus. It talks about thinking styles. It's one of the scales is helping couples understand their patterns
Sex
of
is
cognition.
One of many, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. There's one of the scales that allows people to evaluate their own personal values and talk about what we come together on, but never really talk about. So I'm really looking forward to.
But this is still kind of a therapy tool, right? So the way this works is the therapist has the client go online. It's $50, right? It's less than what people spend getting Grubhub dinner delivered. And then the couple takes the test, and the therapist gets the report. I think the couple gets a report as well. And then they can discuss it in therapy, or a couple can just decide to get it and take it on their own.
Absolutely,
and then
especially
if they
high level.
Reach out to a therapist to talk about it, or they don't ever have to.
No,
and again, kind of have this incredible assessment for for next to nothing.
Right. So yeah, it really is a great tool, and it does sort of change the game for a lot of people, and that's such a wonderful thing. And I love that concept of democratizing therapy.
And sex therapy.
Yeah.
And even in our tiny little field of sex therapy, it's funny how often people, it sounds odd even saying it, but people can forget sometimes that you got to be a good couples counselor to be a sex therapist, right? It might be like but for years, even ASEC, it took a long time for them to go, we should make sure that this couples real solid foundation and couples therapy is part of the training. It was like almost an afterthought after many years.
Well, just like for marriage and family therapists, the people who do couples training, the sex part is an afterthought, if a thought at all.
It's a non-thought.
Right.
Right? Don't get me started on marriage and family therapists that have no sexuality training. Right?
Yep.
The plumbers that don't do toilets.
Exactly.
So, without any further ado, we are going to cut to our wonderful conversation with the brilliant and wonderful Sara Nasserzadeh. And we are so happy to be back with our esteemed guest, Dr. Sara Nasserzadeh. Some people say it hyperbolically. With Sara, we can literally say a true global thought leader in the field of sexual health and couples counseling. As I said in the intro earlier, you've lived and worked in all of the places I wish to be in someday, in London and New York and Northern California and Southern California. Now you're in Beverly Hills. You've done groundbreaking work, training and conferences all over the world. In particular, I know it's not easy doing sexuality work in the Middle East. And you've broken ground there. And I completely forgot a book that did not get enough attention. We need to really bring it back around. The Orgasm Answer Guide, with none other than the legend herself, Beverly Whipple, who literally wrote the book in 1985 on the G-spot.
Yeah.
And it is literally a small book, but powerful, just like Beverly.
Just like the G-spot.
Just like Beverly. Very well said. Yes. And so that's just one of many feathers in your cap. So thank you for joining us. We're delighted.
Yes, indeed.
We usually just get the pleasure of seeing you, at conferences and getting to visit. And thank you for joining us here on Sex Talk.
It's lovely to be here, and I don't know, you raised a lot of expectations tonight, so let's see. When it comes to sex, it's all about managing expectations, so we'll see.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, what prompted me to want to reconnect, aside from just missing you and always being so charmed every time I see you, was your recent post on one of our professional listservs, where you offered to kind of the new generation up and coming this very, very critically important look back and forward, because we know it's kind of a regular theme on the show. Sex therapy, sexology is a weird field. It's still in its relative infancy, and the larger mental health and medical fields are still not comfortable with sexuality. So maybe we can start with just what the lesson to the new generation of sex therapists, where we've been and where we continue to need to go.
Yeah.
Well, I don't quite know if I have the answer. That's why I posed the question to colleagues. But the thing is, Ricky, Larry, that, being in this field long enough, all of us, it's very interesting because I think everybody wants a piece of field of sexology because it's like sensual and it grabs the attention. It sells, for God's sake, like it sells, whatever that has the name of sex and sensuality sells. But then on the other side of it, I remember when I first came to the United States, it was how many years ago now? 12, 13 years ago. I went to one of these universities that should be anonymous tonight. They actually invited me. Funny enough, I didn't say anything. So they said, well, we heard that you came. We would love for you to start a department for us. I said, absolutely. We did all the work. I even involved my university in England to come and, kind of collaborate, putting the curriculum together. Towards the end, as we are going to get the students for the master's and PhD programs, they said, oh, some of the funders on the board, they feel uncomfortable. And I wish I could name the university, because it is a university that out of everywhere else, you would not ever think that they would be so that was really interesting to me, because we were going to talk about sexual function, dysfunction, pleasure was not even on the table, let alone being like hokey pokey or, whatnot that made them uncomfortable. So that was a really interesting shock to my bones that, okay, so there's systematic oppression going on around the field. And then the reason I wrote that article that you're referring to in the listserv was because everybody talks about sexuality and we are such a small field. And I feel like everybody actually needs to come together instead of being segregated. So we talk about, you are a sexuality educator, you're a therapist, you're a da-da-da. But then in essence, we are all promoting what? Sexual well-being for all. So I think that's the purpose. And we are inviting people to kind of find a way towards being congruent with different parts of themselves, their identities, one of them being their sexuality, right? So all of these, I feel like, when we read things about, okay, let's just put this sexuality field in this box and then don't touch anywhere else, I find it to be a little bit immature and naive from the people who propose that, to be perfectly honest. Because imagine the places that as people who are in this field, we get invited. It's from medical school to leadership schools to design schools so we are everywhere. And sexuality is not just people having sex with each other. And I think that's the misconception. And that's why people want to just push it away while they're curious to peek and see what is happening.
Right.
But I think that's why they're kind of pushing it away. So that's why I posed the question as a field, where are we going? And I would like to bring two questions for everybody, students, us in the field, or people out there to think about. I often give it to my clients as New Year resolution too. So just think about it. What is the meaning of sex for people? And what is the role of sex? I think individually, professionally, like organizationally, if we have good answers for these two questions, a lot of this confusion will be resolved. That's my 2 cents on it.
No, I really like that. And I think that's a true perspective. And I want to add also, and maybe get your take on this also, that part of, the word that came up for me when you were describing all those different sort of segregated pieces, it's, as a very small field, we can be very tribal. In terms of, this is my purview, this is your purview, you talk about this, you talk about that. And I'm wondering if we're, in a sense, shooting ourselves in the foot, especially with so much focus, I think particularly on younger therapists and people coming into the field, on, sort of these little camps that are formed around specific identities.
That is so true. That is so true. We are tribal in many aspects. That when we talk about, oh my God, so much comes to my mind. Being involved with different organizations, you get a taste of it, right? We don't talk about this because this is what that organization does. What if we join forces? What if we bring conferences together? It just, politicized so much, and it's just a matter of also money. And also, I think people, instead of looking at this as an objective field, could be scientific field. Actually, the combination of the sociocultural, like if you imagine anthropology, sociology, philosophy, medical, physiology, all of those, instead of dealing with it as an overlapping piece of all of these, we are trying to segregate everybody. And I think if you think of the field of sexuality as that tribe that is marginalized, oppressed over time, and just give us also maybe better understanding as why this tribalism happens, because we need to kind of get together and protect ourselves in a way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from also the larger mental health professions, frankly, lousy history in pathologizing sexually marginalized groups, but even more, quote, normal mainstream folks. One article you referenced in that post, and we discussed in our back and forth setting this up, the Binnick and Miena article on sex therapy specialization or marginalization. And even, in our own enthusiasm in this own very small field, it's easy to forget sometimes, what is the message that we're sending to a couple if their couples counselor, their marriage counselor says, oh, well, this is out of my wheelhouse, I have to refer you to a sex therapist. Now the couple walks out thinking, are we that much of a hot mess that even our couples counselor can't help us? And now we have to go see some weird sex expert. And we don't think of that often enough.
That is so true. That's another thing that startled me when I started in New York first, because people would come to me and say, I have my therapist, I have a couples therapist, and you. Right. And I was like, excuse me, what am I exactly here? Right. What am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. And I see that scenario a lot too. And my worst fear when I hear it is, what are the chances that those 4 therapists are ever going to get together to talk about that case? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that, an aspect of human existence that is probably more holistic than anything else, we kind of treat so myopically and so narrowly.
Yeah. Another point that they make is that, and I remember another one of the years ago, this debate that's been raging on and on about the sex addiction issue. And while everyone was, riling up the torch and pitchfork gang to say, there's no evidence, I remember Charles Moser chiming in.
Apoplectic.
No, it's just a very quiet little chime in a discussion. How much evidence do you sex therapists have on the effectiveness of your work? And it was like one of those, Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So you mentioned the scientific part and the need to integrate in the larger relationship part. So let's segue this into, as I said in the introduction before we came live here, this relationship panoramic is truly the most scientifically sound and
It's brilliant.
I've never seen anything put together. You know, most of the biggies in the field and a lot of general therapists talk about like the Gottmans and their relationship math and these other sort of attempts at finding evidence-based approaches at working with couples. I've never in my 30+ year career seen anything so not just broad and incredibly helpful and so compact a package, but so thoroughly validated and researched. So tell us how this came to be, and then we can talk about what an incredible, useful thing it is.
Thank
How
you.
people can avail themselves of it.
I have to first start by saying that, you know, all of the colleagues who came before us, right, I really owe them a lot because I was first trained by this person, then that method, then that method, then that method. And I think one of the reasons that in the field of couples therapy and, you know, also pertaining psychosexual therapy and sexual medicine, you can't stop learning. You cannot afford to stop learning is that because everybody has a method. And when you're dealing with human, the more you know, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things that came up to me, and it's very like a huge thank you to also my husband, who was a great participant in this research and way of thinking with me. And also the book that we wrote, Wheel of Context for Sexuality Education, the same thing. You know, it was really interesting. In my conversations with him, he's a doctor. And then he often say, well, I wonder, in medicine we have this, but you guys don't. And then I'm thinking about our field and why don't we? Maybe we don't need it. Then, you know, that sparks this critical thinking around kind of, you know, back and forth. One of the reasons that I came up with this idea was a lot of people turn to us and think that, okay, so maybe we're counselors. I would love to think that I'm a counselor, right? So meaning when I was trained, counselor was a person who was there for the people, showed compassion, really good listening skills. And then there was a very clear line between counselor and therapist. Right. Therapist was the person who had, especially psychosexual therapy, who would guide people through CBT methods and cognitive behavioral therapy method, actual homework and, you know, whatnot. And in sexual medicine, obviously you have boxes, you diagnose people, give them stuff, right? So it's really interesting. And my hat as a social psychologist. I was sitting with all of these and I was thinking, wouldn't that be nice? Then I could, when couples come to me, I could give them an assessment so that 6 months down the line, all of a sudden, something doesn't pop up that I'm like, you did all of this work, build this house. The main brick was not there.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where this came from, the whole thing.
Okay.
And then it was based on a model that many people came to us, and I'm sure you guys see that as well, that I love my partner. I'm not in love with him or them.
5,000 times.
So these were the pains. These became my question. How am I supposed to be that person who has an idea? Because when you looked at as an expert, it's not enough for me to just provide an inclusive space. I also have some ideas. I'm sitting in a privileged place after 20 years of working with people. I should have some opinion.
Right.
Tell people where they fit, what to do, right? So these are all the kind of long story behind how this thing was created.
While it is so comprehensive in so many areas of a couple's life, it's a simple, you know, it's in depth with 338 something measures, but something that a couple can do in a half an hour.
Yes.
And it's either something that that a therapist can instruct a couple to do and then process in therapy, or it's something a couple can do on their own and then decide if there's any issues they might want to go consult a counselor or a therapist to discuss.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
For $50, for less than people spend on takeout dinner during these days.
Exactly. That's another thing, dinner. You said dinner, right? So people come to us and say that, well, we kept this date night religiously over the past 27 years. Where I'm like, what happens in those date nights?
Yeah.
Well, we go out, we drink, we eat. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. So all the blood that's supposed to be here for the conversation goes to your digestive system.
Right.
What is left to
You
discuss?
come home and want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, so what is the content of those date nights? That's another thing that, you know, if you have something systematic, maybe that's just my nerd side. I don't want to leave anything behind. But it really pains me that people come to you and say, we've been to couples therapies, 11 couples therapies, we did that. And when you look at the work was beautiful, but because it was not systematic enough for me, for my method of thinking, they fall into the crack again.
Right.
You know, like through the crack again. So that's the thing for me, that, you know, if you have an overall idea of a relationship in main pillars,
Yes.
then you can address them systematically and mend the cracks, get to know them, nurture them before they become chasms.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
that's my favorite part of it. And I like how it's really nicely laid out on the website, and we're going to have this up for our viewers to check it out. Like tachometers, like, you know, green, yellow, red zones. And I noticed that certain aspects of a relationship are more tolerant. Like, for example, the health one, physical health, is a much lower red zone than like sexual health, right? So how did research bring you to find those differences?
Yes. So basically the way that it started was I went back through my own notes, because you know how we have the sessions note, and then I usually write my own notes just to make sense of everything. So I had like years worth of those that I moved from country to country with me and put in boxes, locked boxes. I am a crazy person. So I went through them and I'm like, I have this wealth of information. Who are these couples who thrived? I don't want my couples just to sustain, you know, I want them to thrive. We only get one life as this form, right? And then I came up with some ideas and some thematic analysis that we did. And I did some ground theory application of the research just to see what are the themes that come up. Then after that, I actually modeled it with my husband. We modeled it into these different areas just to see whether they are also scientifically significant, if there is any differential that we can make. Out of these pillars came up, right? Like, for example, physical attraction is one of them. Shared vision is one of them. Compassion, respect, all of those. And then I know that these are the terms that many people use, but what do we mean by them?
Yeah.
Right? How do we cultivate them? How do we make them happen? How do we sustain them over time? That became my work, you know, just to try to see if I can explain it.
Nice. And those often end up being the proverbial cracks that people fall into.
Yeah, and learning how to patch them. I love how it's so beautifully put. Preventing the cracks from becoming chasms.
Right.
By learning how to patch them up earlier in a relationship before they get to that point.
Right. Even to recognize that they're forming, that they're there. You know, and again, how many times, yeah. And I mean, how many times do we see, by the time people come in to see a counselor or a therapist or any kind of professional, they have, I mean, that chasm has gotten so wide. And oftentimes I've kind of conceptualized it. It's almost like at some point they end up turning their back on each other and continue to think they're walking forward. But what they're doing is they're working farther and farther away from each other. And then before they know it, then they turn around and, ooh, look how far apart they are.
And now
Well
you have to start mending that.
Yeah.
You know, our good colleague that you mentioned earlier, Dr. Gottman, for example, one of the researches that they've done, they showed that couples come to couples therapy after 7 years in conflict.
I heard that.
Yeah.
I think how much damage can be done in 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a big deal. And the other thing is, you know, one of the things that I didn't kind of prepare any visuals for this, but it's really interesting. I also check my couples to see where they're going. Look. So I show them this model.
Yeah.
And then I ask them some questions, as you know, where are we going? Because there are so many people in the room and each of us might have a vision for their relationship.
That might not be the same as the
That's
other
right.
one.
Yes, absolutely.
As Larry is saying, that, you know, they're doing this, walking away, thinking that they're getting close. So we see where are we going with all of this? And yeah, so this will be really lovely if people can have access to things like that. And also our colleagues, I'm actually putting the training for free for colleagues.
I noticed, and that's brilliant.
You know, take it and yeah, let's make the world a better place.
Not just so generous, but so like you said, it's this kind of an assessment that will make therapists diagnostic process easier, right? Because even the best of us have to meet with a couple of times before we kind of get that big picture. Yeah. But if you take your car into Midas, they plug it in, the computer in your car prints out, and you get this analysis of all your car systems. This is that for a relationship. So you can save time in therapy. I want to move into this other theme that just blew my mind, the democratization of therapy, because still, even today, even with better, still lousy, but better managed care, even with insurance, therapy is not accessible for everybody. And of course, we know millions of people who have no insurance and can't afford therapy. It's still, I wouldn't say elite anymore, but it's still a privilege. So now we have a tool that for all those millions of people who can't access therapy, they can get that printout that they're like plugging into the computer system of their relationship and seeing where the weak spots are, where the strengths are.
Yeah, oh, I love that, plugging into the computer of their kind of relationship. Yeah, so the idea was, at first I was a little bit skeptical to put it out there for everyone because I thought it's an art to interpret it. But then also I'm thinking people need to know what's going on. And, you know, like we do a strength assessment, you know, Myers-Briggs, you know, I've done so much of that in my business life. So why not for a relationship, you know? And it's really funny because my husband and I came up with this, right? So with the research, with everything, and we are so aligned and educated, we think we are educated. The first time we took it, we're like, did you know that about me? Did you know that about me? And it was so, how does that show up?
Wow.
You know? And then we actually dedicate, like we are committed, the two of us, to do it every year on our wedding anniversary because we want to see, like, just making sure.
Same idea, like you said before, everybody accepts as perfectly normal at work. They're going to have a performance review every year, but nobody ever thinks to review our relationship every year.
Well, yeah, I mean, you go to the dentist for a checkup, you go to your doctor for a checkup, but do we do relationship checkups? We really don't.
So great.
And I also want to throw in that one of the things I really truly appreciate about your program is it's not, you know, like the typical situation where you have somebody saying, okay, this is what I see is going on in your relationship. This is the couple who is saying, we are doing the assessment. We together, you know, we're not necessarily plugging into a computer. We're doing the assessment. We're plugging into ourselves,
like being
right? To really do the check that we need to check. And then you can say, all right, do I need to take it to this specialist? Do I need to go to this specialist?
Yeah, and they have a choice. They can actually, some people can, you know, just do it on their own and get the report on their own. And some people can just send it directly to their therapist so that, you know, if they feel it's more delicate. The other thing that I want to put out there, I know that it sounds like it's my baby. So if I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't have put it out there. And to esteemed colleague like yourselves, thinking that, it's worth it. It really means a lot. And it's really interesting. Colleagues who started working with it, I have great feedback from them because they don't feel stuck with their clients. And also with the homework that they give. For example, one of the pillars that we assess for these is the thinking style. Who assesses for that? I mean, I want to walk when I talk. I want to talk to think. And my partner needs to get the data, go for 2 days, hide in a cave and come back and says, Sara, I figured it, like whatever. We need to know as therapists, if we are putting something forward, like if we are assigning them an exercise, make the context as fruitful for them as possible. Some couples need to sit face to face. Some couples need to go for a hike, then have a conversation. Some people, so these are the things that I'm hoping that, really I'm hoping in a very modest way to change our field and bring everything together. I talk about finances with my couples because that's one of the pillars.
That really struck me, that jumped out at me as well. That financial, not just financial health, but attitudes and values, which is one of the big the classic things that couples fight and end up in therapy over: money, religion, in-laws, politics, kids, right?
Values.
I, for one, am very excited to begin using this in my own practice and with my couples, and I'm really
lovely.
grateful
and I'm here
to
to support in any way possible.
Yes. And a little bird told me that you have another project in the works. Hoping for a Valentine's Day-ish release.
Yes.
What can you tell us?
I am going to create world peace, one relationship at a time before I die. So the idea is that for couples out there, take the relationship panoramic, kind of see where they fit, right? And then I'm going to democratize couples therapy, relationship therapy. My idea is, based on the pillars of this 29-page of report that people get, based on the pillars of relationship panoramic, I would like them to be able to log in, do some education, and my education is based on this. What is the issue? Let's say conflict management today, right? They come, bite size, absorbable size, and then so what? How does that show up in the relationship? Now what? What to do with it? What the hell to do with it?
Yeah.
How are we going to fix it, right? So hopefully by that, then people can start doing their own work. And in my world, I feel like there's a lot of amazing books out there, self-help books out there, amazing books. I still read them to be able to help some of my couples. But we have a lot of literacy, but we are not still fluent in our relationships. So I'm hoping that with this democratization, we actually bring relationship fluency to people.
So nice. So nice.
Oh, that's great. I really look forward to seeing how that unfolds.
Thank you.
So would you come back in February and talk more about it?
Sure, if you have me.
Yes,
of course. Anytime.
We'd love to. This was such an honor and such a treat.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's been too long since we've seen you, and thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Dr. Sara Nasserzadeh, like I said, we'll have our contact information. We encourage everyone watching to check out, go to her website and check out this brilliant relationship panoramic. Our therapist colleagues watching, it's gonna make your work more effective and easier. How could you?
Right. So
how could you argue with
please
that?
avail yourself of it. And if nothing, the price is right.
And it's free for us.
Right.
And your couples will be so thrilled they'll keep coming to you. So we're gonna just thank you once more and say until next time.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you.
See you again.
I've said this before. We've said this
we
before.
We say it every week.
We have to toast. I mean,
Cheers.
there's a privilege that we have to know these people and to have the opportunity to talk to and learn from these people.
It truly is the best part of the job. Even with Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, I get this constant, ongoing, continuing education from the best, brilliant minds in the field, and our students are paying for it.
Yeah. So I'm actually wanting to just let that kind of continue to just sort of simmer.
And I want to have Sara back.
Yes.
For another show.
There's so much more we would love to talk to you about,
indeed.
Sara.
Particularly, let's say in February, around Valentine's Day, when she's getting ready to introduce the new couples program.
Yeah, that would be great. So hopefully we'll let you know about that, and hopefully that's something that you can look forward to as well. So
I have a feeling we won't have to beg too much.
Yeah.
So I guess that'll do it for us for this week's Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Yes, indeed.
We thank you, as always, for joining us, and of course would be so grateful for the hits on the subscribe button. And if you came to us from Facebook, your likes and shares are very well appreciated.
Absolutely. So thank you all again. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great week, and have great sex. So thanks for watching. Stay well.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.